My name is Kevin Fairchild, and I am the Instructional Technology Coordinator at Saddleback Valley Unified School District. Represent, there you go. I have been there for a very, very long time. At, let's see, at about 9 o'clock this morning, it was, I think, 2.5 weeks. Before that, I was a teacher on special assignment for technology and learning in the San Diego Union High School District, which is North County, San Diego. Okay, all right, there you go, there you go. And as part of that, I have to teach teachers about technology and learning. So my job was to teach teachers. Before that, I was a high school teacher. So I went from teaching high school students to teaching adults. You can decide whether that was an upgrade or not. It depends on the session, absolutely right. Speaking of sessions, many of you have probably clicked on the presenter resources in the SCED, and you will find that it's wrong because it points to my old district. I do have a link for this at the end, so if you're looking in the presenter resources, you won't find that here. But as part of my job in teaching teachers, I had to teach them about 21st century instruction. I would go into PD for English teachers or math teachers, and they'd say, oh good, 21st century instruction. And then I would hear something like this. Cool, show me a website. Yay. What apps do you have for me? Or I would hear something like this. I can't do 21st century instruction. I don't have Chromebooks. I don't have enough tools in my classroom to do 21st century instruction. Forget it. This one was actually my favorite. 20th century instruction was pretty good too. 21st century instruction is not about the technology. It's about a mindset. So in talking to you today, I'm obviously going to be drawing on the writings of a lot of writers, Mark Prensky, Catlin Tucker, Lisa Nielsen. If I do this right, the person who you're going to hear the most echoes from is Will Richardson. How many of you have ever read or seen anything from Will Richardson? Okay, like 4 hands. Here's my advice to you. Everybody get up, go outside, get on YouTube, watch 45 minutes of Will Richardson. It's going to be a better use of your time for the next 45 minutes. Okay, you're still here. All right. Will Richardson is the writer and speaker who, when I started as an instructional technology TOSA, really gave me the light bulb, gave me the aha moment. I get it now. I get why, when I was teaching high school science, I thought I was doing great, and I was. But I wasn't really preparing kids for their futures. I was preparing them to take a test. So my big aha moment came as I'm reading the works of Will Richardson, and that leads me to the big message for today. So I'm about to give you the big idea, and then you're free to leave, because everything else is elaboration. The big idea for today: we all have, not everybody, but many of us have access to all kinds of information. The world's information is at my fingertips, and I use this device, which can access everything, to look at cat videos. Okay, all right, okay. No, that's valuable. That's something. But that changes everything in schools. It requires some fundamental shifts in the way we do things. And it's not about technology, it's about how we think about our instruction. The change we're in the middle of isn't minor and it isn't optional. That teacher who said 20th century instruction was good enough for her, she was right, because she was being educated in the 20th century. Our kids aren't. Our kids are going to have a future that we can't predict. And we have to be able to give them the skills to be successful in that future. That sounds like a big challenge. How do we do that when we can't even guess what's coming next? Wow. I just got intimidated. I hope you didn't come here for the answer to that. I have some ideas. And as you might guess, they come from Will Richardson. So you don't have to go watch 45 minutes of Will Richardson, but I'm going to show you two 2-minute clips. This is from a talk in January of 2014 that will set the stage for what I want to talk about today.
So the new realities that you have to face right now are these. Information, knowledge, and teachers are in abundant supply and ubiquitous. We don't own it in schools any longer. It's expanding and changing at a rate like never before. We can't get our brains around how fast this is happening. We can't predict what's coming next. NASA is printing food. We are printing human tissue, printing it on a printer. Human tissue. And the skills and literacies that are going to be required for kids to learn deeply and powerfully and productively at this moment are very different from the ones that we needed when we were in school, when we were growing up, when we were learners of that age. And by the way, we can't control this. We can try, we can filter, we can block, but we can't. There's not a 14-year-old in your schools with access at home that couldn't publish to the world. And hopefully they're doing that in a really good way. But this is not the world that school was built for. And this is the challenge that we have. School was built for a world of scarcity, where if I needed the Pythagorean theorem, I needed to go somewhere at a particular time with another group of kids the same age, with a teacher who could help me understand that. Don't need that any longer. So the key shift is, in general, this world is moving away from institutions toward the self. We don't need these intermediaries in the ways that we needed them in the past. That's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's just the way that things have developed and will continue to develop. And in a school setting, we're moving away from institutionally organized learning to self-organized learning. And this is a wonderful thing, by the way, if we know what we're doing, if our kids know what they're doing here. I don't need your schools to learn, for my kids to learn algebra any longer. If the measure of learning algebra is to pass the algebra test, I don't need you for that any longer. I can go lots of places to learn enough algebra now to pass the test. Please don't hear me say that I don't need you and that I don't want you. I absolutely do. But my kids need you for something different now. My kids need you to help them learn more deeply about learning productively. And this is really the disruption that we're in. How do we reframe our value in schools, in classrooms, as teachers, as educators, in a world where so much learning exists outside of the walls?
My students don't need me to teach them about plate boundaries anymore. My students don't need me to teach them Newton's laws. They can look up Newton's laws of motion, and they can find 2,000 videos that are way better explanations than anything I can give. So am I, as a teacher, outmoded? Am I just not needed anymore? That's not what Richardson wants to say, and it's not what I want to say either. What you heard him say was, schools have to be different. We have to work with our students in different ways. And it's not better or worse. It's 21st century. It's here we are. We have to do this. So here's the second of our two clips.
If you really want to transform things, it has nothing to do with technology. Technology has nothing to do with transformation. If I asked you to put a little dot on this chart as to where you are, pretty much where your classrooms are right now, in terms of breadth of curriculum versus depth of curriculum, in terms of teacher organized versus student organized. I'm betting most of your teachers still do lesson plans. They are organizing most of the education. And I'm betting most of you agree that your curriculum there's just so much of it that you can't really go deep into much of it at all. And so I'm guessing most of you would probably be down in that lower left quadrant somewhere. But if you really want to transform things, you need to think differently about where you want your classrooms to be. In a world of abundance where we have access to so much stuff, if kids are not self-organized and if they're not going deeply into something and learning how to become master learners in some context, why not? Why not? Because they're going to have to be self-organized and they're going to have to be master learners when they leave you. If they're going to really make sense and leverage abundance, they're going to have to be up there, and that's the transformation, by the way. And that has nothing to do with technology. That has nothing to do with iPads or laptops or anything else. That has to do with a mindset. It has to do with a lens that we bring to how we think about schools. And it's this. You know it. You know it. The transformation is making more of these things show up in every single classroom on every single day. My friend Gary Steger says, school should be the best 7 hours of a kid's day. And if you want to make school the best 7 hours of a kid's day, just look up there. How do you make more of that happen? And you know it. This is your list. Now, if you have technology, however, you can amplify that transformation because technology gives you more opportunities to do great work in the world, to ask really interesting questions, to connect with other teachers and people who are passionate about the things that you're passionate about.
So we want to figure out a little bit about how we can help our students become, as Richardson says, master learners. We need them to be very, very good at learning. So what I want to try to do is I want to try to outline 21 instructional shifts for 21st century learning. You see what I did there? The whole 21 thing. There you go. Right, I'm sorry, I'm getting a message here. I'm sorry, there's been a complication in the room next door. The speaker didn't show up. We're going to need you to give a detailed presentation on zerbaflaxes in about 5 minutes. Ooh, really? Oh, it's a big crowd too. So, zerbaflaxes, everything that you need to know about zerbaflaxes, please turn to the people nearest and dearest to you. If they're not here, turn to the people next to you. And what I want you to think about is, what would you have to do in order to give a comprehensive presentation about zerbaflaxes? You have 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Start. What was the first thing you did when I asked you to find out something about zerbaflaxes? You Googled it. Did you find anything? No. Do you know how hard it is to make up words that give 0 Google results? It's actually kind of fun. So you didn't find anything. Okay. What'd you do next? Okay. So you set up a shared Google Doc. Okay. With who? Oh, you did an impromptu unconference ed camp back there. That area back there, that's bigger than I thought. That's cool. What'd you do? Oh, a constructivist approach to make the audience do the work. That's a great idea. I've never done anything like that before. You didn't find anything in Google. Did anybody try Bing? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's a good one. That's good, Fairchild. Yeah, that's funny. So the first thing you went to do was to search for information. You had to find out what it was. You had to find out where it lives. You had to find out what it eats, if it eats. So the first thing you had to do was you had to find information. And if your first source of information wasn't good, you had to look other places. Maybe with your friends. Maybe with an audience of people. Maybe you set up an impromptu ed camp in the back of the room. Now, you've got some information. Let's say you found a couple of pieces of information, several websites, the International Society for the Preservation of Zerboflaxes, Zerboflaxes and you, and why all Zerboflaxes must die. Okay? So you found those websites. What do you do with them? What's the next step? Okay, so you've got to evaluate the websites, right? You've got to evaluate the websites. You've got to decide whether they're giving you valuable information or not. So in other words, you've got to critically evaluate that information in context. Good. Whew, those are 2 hard steps. You found the information, then you evaluated it. What's the next thing you have to do when you go next door? You've got to organize it, and then you've got to deliver it to someone. Somehow, maybe you made a Google Doc. Maybe you made a presentation. Maybe you found a video that showed Zerboflaxes in their native mating behaviors. Don't Google that. Don't Google that. So, in essence, what you had to do, gather information from a variety of sources. You had to evaluate it critically and in context. And then you had to do something with that information. Present it, share it, save it, pass it along, put it into another piece. This is what our students are going to have to be able to do with the challenges that they're facing. If they can do this, if they can do these steps, then they're set with whatever new technology comes along, with whatever new problems come along in their lifetimes, which will be long after we're all gone. If they can do these things, then they're good. If we want our kids to be able to do this, then we've got to shift the way we do instruction. And so, again, this is where I mentioned that I've got 21 instructions. This is before I was interrupted by the bulletin from the next door. 21 instructional shifts for the 21st century. So, 1, students have to gather information from a variety of sources. No longer from a textbook, no longer from the authority, the sage on the stage, but instead from crowdsourced of information. Wikipedia, from, God help me, Yahoo Answers, from all kinds of sources, from the ed camp in the back of the room, from crowdsourced from the crowd, literally from the crowd. Single sources of information are no longer useful. We're not going to package this information for kids and put a cover on it and sell it for $175 and call it a textbook. But students are going to be finding information from them from multiple sources. We're all used to students and teachers in isolation. If we want our students to be successful in the 21st century, we need to collaborate with others. They need to collaborate with others. We have video phones now, and there are experts all around the world who are waiting to talk to your students. There are classes all around the world who would love to talk with your students. Mystery Skype. How many of you have ever done a mystery Skype? A few. Awesome. So, connecting students with each other, with experts in and out of education. This is the main one that, again, that Richardson talked about. Information scarcity to information abundance. So that information is available all over the place if you have the devices for it. And that is a big if, because the future and the information abundance, it's already here, but it's not evenly distributed, is it? So that is clearly a huge issue. Come on. There you go. Students can Google. Students can find things. Students can bring in information from their own lives, from their own experience, from their parents, from their friends, from their colleagues, from their neighbors. No longer do I have to be the one, as the teacher, to say, here is all the information for this class. Now, I don't want them to be able to, I don't want them to just go find anything. I mean, I don't need them finding the Flat Earth Society website. But if they do, I want them to be able to evaluate it critically in context, don't I? So I have to be able to have them evaluate this information, but they need to be able to find it themselves. We live in a world of standards. Standards, 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 standards. What we've seen with the new sets of standards is that they are less of a laundry list of facts that students must memorize, and more about skills that students should have. Now, we can argue forever about how useful those sets of standards are and whether they're effective and whether they're developmentally appropriate, etc. But 21st century learning is going to be defined by what students need. Again, students now have the choice, everybody does, to go find something and learn about it. How many of you have ever learned how to do something by watching YouTube? Did a teacher tell you to do that? Probably not, right? When I need to figure out how to install my new dishwasher, I go to YouTube and I learn how to do it. So this kind of self-directed learning is not about standards, it's about students' needs at a particular time. Very similar to the last one, 21st century instruction is self-directed. How many of you have ever heard of 20% time or Genius Hour? Right. It's all about kids choosing their own projects, their own learning goals. This is about self-directed learning for students, and we want our students to be able to do that. Moving away from what I'm doing right here and talking at you into the world of inquiry. As a science teacher, I've been teaching by inquiry forever. I would have labs and have the kids have to figure out whatever. They'd get mad at me because I wouldn't tell them the answer. And they would say, but you know the answer, why aren't you telling me? And I said, because I want you to find it yourself. And they're like, well, other people have found it before me, so they wanted to do collaborative work and research. And I said, no, you got to figure it out yourself. Having them do inquiry in their labs. Now, what we're seeing with Common Core and other sets of standards is that inquiry is not just for science anymore, but students learning by doing things, by inquiring, and not just passively listening. Individual work is great. Collaborative work is better. We know that there are very few things that we do that are purely an individual's effort. Very few things. I didn't come up with all this stuff on my own. I worked with people. And I had to work with people well. I had to know those skills. I had to be able to do that. We want our students to be collaborative learners in their lives and in their classes. 21st century learning can happen anywhere at any time. It might even be happening right now. Watch out. You might be learning things. I don't know. I'm not sure. But you might be learning things right now. Again, the information abundance and the interconnectedness that everybody has now is allowing for this learning, this 21st century learning, to occur anytime, any place. I no longer have to go to a classroom with a person who has a repository of information and wait for them to give it to me. I can go find stuff. I can go learn whenever and wherever I want. Students learn from experience. Good experiences, bad experiences, fun experiences, boring experiences. 21st century students learn from experience rather than being told. I want students to learn by doing and by reflecting and by thinking instead of because I told them to read pages 16 to 24 and do the odd numbers at the back of the chapter. 21st century learning embraces technological tools. 21st century learning is student-centered. Student-centered means the students have to have some agency, some choice about how, what, when, where, and to what degree they learn. Now that doesn't mean they have 100 degrees of freedom. That doesn't mean they can do whatever the hell they want. It means they have some agency, some level of choice. And that level of choice, of course, is going to be different at different age groups, isn't it? 21st century learning is about skills. What can you do? It's less about what you know. Again, I keep emphasizing this. We just looked up and learned all kinds of things about zerbaflaxes. The real question is, what can you do with that information? 21st century learning is about authentic products as opposed to artificial products. An artificial product is something that has no value whatsoever except in the classroom itself. Yay, you did this worksheet, put it up on the refrigerator. English teachers talk about writing for the refrigerator. You did your essay, went to the teacher gave it back, kid puts it on the refrigerator, 6 months later it falls down, gets all dirty underneath the refrigerator. Authentic products have value to the student or to the community or to the school outside of the classroom. Anytime that a student is writing a letter about some issue in their school's neighborhood, anytime that a student is posting something publicly for others to read, anytime that they're producing something that has some value to them outside of the classroom, beyond just a grade, then we can call that an authentic product. And that's what we want to be able to do. This is probably something that is a long way away. I think in our current school system, we are a long way away from true mastery learning. You have learned everything that you need to learn for whatever we call 4th grade. Now you can move into 5th grade even though you haven't been in school for 186 days. Well, okay. But we can look at ways to use badges, to use certifications, to use competency-based measures to actually measure student mastery rather than just how long they've been sitting in our class. From passive learning, sitting and getting, to active learning, doing things with and to animals, I can't really say, I don't really know what the animals are in this slide. I think it's a turtle, maybe? I don't even know, but they're certainly doing something to those animals. Hopefully for the animals. That's what I meant, for the animals. For the animals. Students can either recreate or repeat what we give them in the classroom, or we can have students create their own products. 21st century, we want students to be creating their own products. Points-based grading is wonderful. No, it's really not. Standards-based grading is, I think, the direction of the future. Again, this idea of competency. Can you do what we're asking you to do? Not at a 70% level or a 65% level for a D, and then you move on. Well, I'm sorry, you didn't really learn a whole lot, but okay, go on. But can you really do this? Can you really master the skills that we're asking you to master? And that's what standards-based grading helps us get to. Moving it away from giving it to the teacher to publishing it publicly for the world, for others, whatever world that encompasses. Maybe the world is just the kids in the class and their parents and grandparents. Maybe the world is the entire school. Maybe the world is the community. Maybe the world is the world. Students have the ability to do that now. Anybody who has a Google account can set up a Blogger blog, and there you go. So students can publish their work. Again, getting to the authenticity of it. 21st century learning is multidisciplinary, moving teachers and students away from their silos, away from their particular content, and looking at how students' skills can apply across a wide variety of contents. And it's all about students creating things. They can use their technology to consume media, to watch, to read, but we want them to be doing. We want them to be creating their own and contributing to this wide web of information that's out there, this network that surrounds us all. When I work with teachers in my district, I have to emphasize, this is not a checklist. This is not something that I have to do for every single lesson, every single day. This is not something that is, an absolute must list. Some of these, as I said, assessed by mastery versus assessed by seat time, some of these are out of our control. Whether your district uses standards-based grading or points-based grading is probably not in your control as a classroom teacher. But there are ways that we can design our instruction that move us to these new ideas. Again, you're not going to use every single one every single time. But if we can move ourselves, our instruction, our students along this path, then we're starting to prepare them for the world they're going to be in. And we're giving them the skills to be able to gather information from a variety of sources, to evaluate that information critically and in context, and to be able to do something with that information. Now, I mentioned standards a little while ago, and how our laundry list of fact sets of California standards have gone by the wayside for most areas and have been replaced by standards that are not always about what to teach the students. Common Core, NGSS, CTE, language standards are now not just about content, but they also require some of these instructional shifts. For example, NGSS Science Standard, High School Physical Science 1, plan and conduct an investigation to gather evidence and compare the structure of substances, the bulk scale, and infer the strength of electrical forces between particles. If students are really going to meet that standard, then they have to demonstrate some skills. They have to use inquiry because they're designing an investigation and they're creating it themselves. These three instructional shifts that I've just gone, three of the ones that I've just gone through with you, these are required by this particular standard here. Common Core, literacy standard, writing 6, use technology including the internet to produce and publish writing and to interact and collaborate with others. We're asking students to publish, we're asking students to collaborate, and we're asking them to use technological tools. These are required in the standards. This isn't just, hey, Fairchild thinks this would be a good idea. Our standards are moving this way. CTE standard, number 2, communicate clearly, effectively, and with reason. Giving authentic products, collaborative, and it's multidisciplinary. American Council of Teaching Foreign Languages. School and global communities. Learners use the language both within and beyond the classroom to interact and collaborate in their community and the globalized world. It's skills-based. Students are learning from experience. They're learning by doing, by talking with others, not just by reading a book. And students and teachers collaborating worldwide. Every set of new standards that we have and the recommendations and best practices from educational organizations are moving in this direction, are requiring, are necessitating these shifts, these 21 instructional shifts. What I'd like you to do right now is I'd like you to talk again with the people nearest to you, 2 or 3 people there. I'd like you to pick one of these, one that you're familiar with. These are some models for 21st century learning. Here's some flipped learning, blended learning, which is online and face-to-face, project-based learning, badges and gamification, mastery learning, and 20% time genius hour. What I'd like you to do is talk to the people next to you for about 2 minutes and 17 seconds. And I'd like you to think about how these instructional shifts that we've just gone through are supported by these different models of instruction. So if you know about flipped learning, you can talk about that. If you know about blended learning, you can talk about that. 2 minutes and 17 seconds starting right now. If you're familiar with flipped learning and blended learning, then you know that it allows students to learn anytime, any place, that it's not constrained by being in a classroom at a particular hour at a particular time. You know, it gives them a certain amount of control over the pace of the learning, so the students have some mastery, some agency in the pace and the timing for their learning. You know, if you are familiar with project-based learning or 20% time, that is largely about authentic products, about student choice, about learning being defined by student needs, not so much by standards. If you're familiar with badges, gamification, or mastery learning, you know that this is all about assessing students by competency, by their skills, that it's about what they can do and show, and not just about what they learn, what they know. So these different models of 21st century learning can support the instructional shifts that we want students to be able to, that we want our instruction to be able to make here. So I only have a few minutes left. I'm hoping that, that this has been useful, but what I'd like you to do in the next 3 minutes and 22 seconds is I'd like you to reflect on what I've done right here, right now. To what extent did this session model 21st century instruction? Why or why not? And how could the session be modified? How could I do this better to reflect the 21 instructional shifts for 21st century instruction? What I had hoped to do was to have a smaller room with groups of people and actually lead people through conversations, and I quickly realized that wasn't really going to happen here, especially in a large room in a large session like this. So there are always constraints on what we can do. Again, I can't emphasize enough, the 21 instructional shifts for 21st century learning is not a checklist. It's not your daily to-do list. It's not something you have to do in every single lesson, but if you can start thinking about that and start moving in that direction, then you're going to be better preparing your students for their futures. And that's my takeaway from today. 21st century learning is not about technology. It's about instructional practices that prepare students for their future, not our past. So I hope this has been useful. I hope I've given you a little bit to think about. If nothing else, I exposed you to Will Richardson, and you should thank me for that. My contact information is up here. The slide deck, these are the actual slides for this. And again, feel free to contact me either by email or on Twitter, and I will be around for the rest of the conference. I hope this has been useful. Thank you very much.